This is Lord of the Rings cards. And this is my first video on this. And this was, I played with Quincy Morris. He's made some game videos on this as well. And this was a tournament, and we had both won 2 games each. And we played a third game against each other. The person that won the tournament. We're going to go to my account, we're going to go to game history, and we're going to watch this game. So I always pick first, and I always bet 4. Going first is a very big advantage. I was actually expecting him to bet 5 because he's a dwarf deck, and I already knew this because it's David, and he's always dwarves. But for some reason he bet 3, which is very beneficial for me. I decided to keep these cards. And then we got Aragorn. Nothing too fancy, just getting my guys out. This is all of the companions I have in this deck. Oh yeah, he did make me discard a card. And then at this point he was like, I finally did a damage to you. So this is pretty nice. I have all shadow cards in my hand while he is doing stuff. Now, okay, I meant to pause here. He gave me 9 Twilight. And I was wondering if I had enough Twilight to play the Cave Troll. And I'm thinking, in hindsight, what I should have done, and I'll tell you why I didn't do this, but what I should have done is played nothing, except for that. And then maybe discarded a card because I had Host of Thousands, did the math to be like, okay, if he moves on, I'm going to have 13 Twilight, which is exactly enough to play this man and this man. And I discard some of my other cards. And I think that would have been maybe better. It would have made it to where he would have had to fight and lose a dwarf, depending on what cards he had. And maybe he would have been like, nah, I'm gonna stay here. Now you have all the shadow cards in your hand, but then he would have been stopped at site 2. So what I did, I was too afraid of not having my shadow, of him not moving on to site 3. But I really think that this was a mistake, and I should have played nothing. And if I can look at my discard pile, I discarded him earlier because I had Host of Thousands, so I can be like, oh, I'll pull him out. But one thing about him is that is not, it's just an orc, not a minion, so it wouldn't have decreased his roaming penalty. But if I had 13 Twilight, Goblin Runner costs 1 because he adds 2. Cave Troll would cost 12. But I didn't do that, so this was a mistake. I decided to pull that guy out, and then the Goblin Runners were free, so I played 3 minions for 3 costs. Not the worst, but I wasn't able to like monopolize on this to any significant extent. And it wasn't enough to play Cantea. All I did was get rid of his condition. Like, honestly, I could have done so much more to him, and as it is, all of those orcs that I played just die here. It was a mistake, honestly. I did 2 damage to him. Did I even do damage to Glowin? And then all of this is irrelevant because he can just heal it. Though Actually, that's not. Kantea, because of how things worked out, he had to use Bounder, so he's not going to have that. So it did do something, but it could have been significantly better. Now I'm going to pause this for a second. So I have this card, and the reason for that is I have a different card in my deck that is anytime I remove a burden, except for Hobbit's game text, I get to heal. But I didn't draw that, so I was like, well, I'm going to still use it to remove burden, because 4 burdens is a little scary, because there's one Nazgul, which is kind of counter to my deck, that is spot 4 burdens to choose who you assign him to. And then if you assign him to Mary and then Pippin right after that, you can just kill my hobbits at the beginning when I very likely am going to have 4 burdens like this. But one of the reasons why I played this now instead of like trying to wait is because it makes me not die to that Nazgul, which there's a pretty significant chance that I'll draw one of those cards. So I stopped at site 4 because he had 5 Twilight. If I moved on, he was going to get me another 5 Twilight, 5 more for the companions. This makes it -1. So he would have had 14 Twilight, which is enough to play both the Cave Troll, because that's -3 for Underground, so that's 7. Rare Balrog is 8. And if he just had like a Goblin Runner in his hand or something, he could hit me with both of those. And while I could have survived it, it would have been a lot of damage, and I think that was the right call. So now my guys aren't roaming. And I had enough to finally play the Cave Troll on him. And that. So, pretty solid. And it will be enough to make him not move on, which is definitely very good. Still didn't draw the card that allows me to heal a bunch, but I can still get rid of burdens. Now the interesting thing is, do I play Elf Song? And which things to get rid of. So what I should have done, because he's Moria, I should have gotten rid of Tale of Gil-galad, because he's going to get rid of it right here, right now. And then I could have kept like the Exert to add to the archery total, which would have been really significant to have, especially against Moria. But instead, I choose to lose Pippin because I don't have any of the possessions to make him useful. I just discarded Elf Song. That makes sense. Yeah, he had 2 Tildern Wicks again, which means he just healed. And because I got rid of that condition earlier, that I'm still able to get that stuff. Now what I get rid of here is an interesting question, but I get rid of Tildern Wicks again so that he doesn't heal as much. I might have, since he has Gimli's Helm, maybe I should have played Inquea, but he could have just killed him, Inquea. So I think this was the right call. But that is pretty significant, because then I can play him again to get rid of another condition. And I have 2 of this guy in this deck because dwarves are a pretty significant problem for my deck. Especially if you bet 5, because then I really have to deal with your Fellowship. See, I'm now able to play him again, and he's free. but unfortunately I didn't have enough cards to really do anything, which puts me in a very dangerous situation. At this point in time, I have to move to site 7. And I finally have the Shire Concentrate aside, which will allow me to heal at site 7, which is one of the nice things about a deck that has healing abilities, is that it allows you to sometimes skip the site 6. Because if you're going from 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, if you stop at site 6 is a pretty significant question. So now, if you're realizing, Aragorn now has the ability to become a 16 strength with Merry's buff to him, so I can just beat the Cave Troll now. And since I've got Mithril Coat, taking 1 wound on Frodo isn't a big deal. I'm going to just kill everything. I have 4 copies of the Cave Troll in my deck, and I seem to always run into the issue of not having the Cave Troll in my hand. It's just like I need him in my hand, but I can never draw him. But what happens here, if I remember correctly, was very, very nice. Cave Troll! I'm always wanting to draw the Cave Troll, and it never happens, but this time it did happen. So it was very nice. But I think I should have put that scimitar on that guy, maybe. Okay, so I'm just going to stop here. So normally you would think that my deck with the big Goblin Swarm would have the Spot 5 Orcs to prevent you from moving on again, but I don't. I have this one instead for exactly this exact scenario. Because he moved on to Site 8, which means that now if I had the stop you with 5 orcs, that would then mean, since I'm at site 7, they could stop me with that site. So instead I have this site, because normally I kill off Pippin eventually, so I'm going to have 4 companions. So hitting you with 2 archery wounds seems pretty good. But also, just like having it to where it doesn't hurt me and I can move past that so I can win with Fellowship. If I had that site, I would lose. And most of the time, I'm going first. So if I'm playing my site 8, it means that like they just leapfrogged me like this, which is why I have that as the site 8 and not the other one. If I bet lower and more likely to go second, then I'd have the other site. But 9 times out of 10, I'm going first because I'm always betting 4. But dwarf decks normally can bet 5, which is why I thought he was going to bet 5. Anyway, we will continue. Oh yeah, I was able to put that on the Cave Troll. But I don't think it was able to really do anything. Maybe I should put more Nazgul in this deck, because they seem to often have just big Twilight pools, even with the Cave Troll. But now, since I moved to Site 7, my deck is able to handle this. I have some healing capacity. We're gonna heal a lot, which is very helpful. You had an interesting decision there, choosing to kill the guy with the 3 archery wounds instead of spreading it out. Which kind of makes sense because that guy was going to die to Aragorn anyway. So maybe I should have waited around and thought that through, because I didn't really want him to do that. And if I had done it later, then Aragorn could have wounded that guy twice and killed him, and then I would have still had that condition, and it would have been exactly the same, but Legolas would have had one more wound because he would have hit Legolas once. But actually I would have probably used this condition to prevent that wound. So it would have been, that would have been better. That's another mistake that I made. That's kind of small. But we'll see who wins the final tournament. 5 minions versus my fellowship. Who will win? Yeah. Legolas having those 2 wounds is definitely helpful. You're like, why did you wound that guy twice? Because power according to its stature. I did that skirmish first because Mary can help if something goes wrong. And then shkapow. What William was saying, I could have saved Legolas there. Mary could have exerted, and then I used this to keep everyone alive. But I didn't. And that is the game. I was the winner of this tournament. And one of the things that I really like about this deck, and we'll go, this is my just good cards. You can look at this of just solid cards, but that's not actually the deck I was using. One of the things that I like about this deck, and I have 2 Ys in that I have a weird way of calculating stuff. So 7 is just normal wins. Then this is wisdom when I was stupid, which I could actually maybe add that one to a win when I was stupid, which this isn't accounting for. And then I have 2 losses. One was from a dwarf deck that bet 5 at the beginning, and the other was to a Twilight Denial deck. Both games against Bird, against William. But I've played like 20-something games with this deck, or versions of this deck, and the most recent version of this deck has won a bunch of times when I've been stupid. So it's some degree of foolproof. When a lot of the other versions of this deck, I would lose because I was stupid, and I was like, I don't feel like counting those because it wasn't the deck's fault. It was my fault being stupid in how I was playing the game. But still was able to win with some amount of mistakes. But not a lot. Like, some of those are even subjective, whether or not what I did at Site 2 was that big of a mistake, and then the one at the end at site 8 wasn't really that big of a mistake either. But hopefully you enjoyed this rundown of this tournament game. Thanks for watching.